Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2. We made it. We're on to number 2. Colin, congratulations.
Appreciate
It's always good to get to your second one.
Yes.
Of Beyond the Norm. Colin Johnoff, Mark Clementi, we're your hosts. We have another great guest scheduled for you in our next segment. You're definitely going to want to stay tuned to hear from him. Some great stories, some great insight, some great advice for everybody out there. But first, like we always like to do when we kick off our podcast, we want to talk about the extraordinary, those things that make you go, wow, right out of the gate, right, to get your minds clicking. And so for this week, Colin and I were preparing for the podcast, and I'm sure as you're all aware, I mean, we're recording this on Wednesday, August 29th?
30th, I believe.
30th? Whatever.
30th,
I'm
yeah.
so terrible with dates. A hurricane's about to hit Florida again, and it got us to thinking how special these first responders have to be. You know, everybody's fleeing from it, right? They're evacuating all the towns in Florida, but then you have first responders coming in, preparing to care for those that are going to need it, to go into the eye of the storm, literally, and protect and serve those folks that may still be there, property, whatever it may be. And you ask yourself the question, would I do that? And as we're sitting here, Colin, I still don't know. For me, I'd like to say, yeah, I would do what I could, but when presented with it in the moment, and you have to make that decision, like, here it comes, and they're saying it's a grade 3 or 4, depending. I mean, that's pretty severe. Your take on first responders and you know, how special they have to be to go in while everybody's going out.
Right. I think any act of service like that, military, police officers, firefighters, first responders, it's the ultimate act of selflessness. Yeah. It's super hard. Some people just have it naturally.
Right.
Like you said, I like to believe there's certain things I would be able to do, but in the heat of the moment, you just don't know. Right. And I think even within that demographic of people who serve, there's people who are going to rise to the occasion more so than others. Mm-hmm. And I think it comes back to truly loving, helping others, and being able to necessarily not think of yourself as a hero, but being willing to do what a hero needs to do. Mm-hmm. And that's put others before yourself. And that's being willing, in some cases, to die to save another. And I think if you never saw the story about the wrestlers who survived a grizzly bear attack.
Never heard, yeah.
So to kind of tie it into
right.
someone who's not a first responder but had an innate reaction, I think proves the point of first responders. So these two kids, they're looking for antlers. Mm-hmm. So they're shed hunting. And this one friend just gets to yell out bear. That's all he gets to yell before this grizzly bear drills him. He goes 30 yards. The grizzly bear then pounces on this kid. His friend is watching this happen. And in that split moment,
right.
a million thoughts are going through his mind. Mm-hmm. He thinks, like, I got to go run and get help. But then it hits him. He's going to die if I go and try and get help by the time I come back. So he throws himself onto this bear, pulls on its neck, pulls on its ear, and tries to run away. The bear pounces on him. He ends up getting the worst of it. Somehow they both miraculously live. But he tells this story, and he says, I would have rather died than lived in knowing I could have helped my friend. And I think that becomes the difference with first responders, with us, and we don't know until we're in that moment. Right, until we're forced to make that split decision. And honestly, it's why I don't criticize people who are in that situation and may choose wrong, because you just don't know.
Right.
But first responders and people who choose to serve already in mind have the thought process, I would rather do good knowing it could harm me. And I think they're the ultimate special. I have the utmost respect for those types of people, because I haven't made that choice to willingly put myself in harm's way in advance, knowing that every single day that's going to present itself. So I tip my cap to those people. I think they're a special breed of humans.
They really are. And as you get older, and that's one thing that I've really thought about a lot as I'm on the back nine, as I'd like to say now.
Oh, you're thriving. You're in your prime.
Yeah, right, yeah. but that's what it's about. You want to do whatever you can to help your fellow human being. And we fall short, right? There's opportunities that do present themselves. And, whether you're, religious, faithful, whatever you want to say or not, I think you are put in certain circumstances sort of as a test to see how you, and as I reflect back, I mean, I think sometimes I've been there and other times I've come up way short in my own mind. And I think that becomes more important as you get older. I mean, I don't have the physical capabilities that I had when I was younger, but that's, anytime something like this happens, there's a fire, there's a catastrophe, there's, that always grabs me. And, in some way, you feel like you're falling short because you're not out there helping your fellow human being in their time of need.
Yeah, it's tough, right? And I think one thing, I'm a very deep thinker, right? I'm constantly thinking about different things in life, different scenarios I could be put in. And one thing I've tried to do, honestly, is train myself, like if I'm somewhere in a state of emergency or catastrophe, to try and train myself to be willing to be the first person to jump in and help whatever the situation is. Now, I don't know. I hope I'm never in that situation. Selfishly,
Right.
I hope I never have to be in an emergent state where I need to rush to do something. But I think as humans, what we can do is try as much as we can to mentally prepare ourselves for when a situation like that may come. And, not everyone's going to. Most people won't. But when we're talking about these, beyond the norm types of people, they get themselves prepared as much as they can for the moment.
It's amazing. And as you said earlier, and I'm just going to reiterate, thanks to all of our first responders out there. It's unbelievable what you do, and just know that you have many people out there that are grateful for your actions that you take in the eyes of a storm. So thank you for that. All right, now we're going to transition. We're going to take a little break, and when we come back, our guest for this week, Rick Etling. And like I said earlier, you don't want to miss this. Some great insight from a gentleman who reached the pinnacle in corporate America. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. One of the benefits of having a coffee shop is that you get to meet some great people. And our guest today, I've gotten to know pretty well over the 2.5+ years, whatever it's been since we've been open. Right. He's become, I shouldn't say this out loud, but he knows it. He's one of my favorite customers that we have. And we've had conversation after conversation. I've gotten to know Rick very well. I find it fascinating. And, as someone who spent 18, 20, whatever it was, 20 years in corporate America, to come across somebody that reached the levels that Rick did at a huge company speaks volumes about what he's done, who he is, and what he accomplished during his career. So with that, I'd like to welcome our guest for this week, Mr. Rick Etling. Rick, thanks so much for being here. It means a lot to us that you would take the time. Rick is retired now.
For quite a while.
So he could be doing any number of different things. Happy Tuesday, by the way.
Yeah, it's Tuesday.
It's not Tuesday, but
That's our
you'll
joke.
hear about, it's our joke. You'll hear about that in a little bit. But no, honestly, thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to get to know you over these years and get to know more about your story. So why don't we start there? This is your time. So why don't you just, tell us your story. Give us an overview of, how Rick started and where you got to, and we'll delve into it from there.
All right. Westmoreland County kid, so I'm local. Decided for whatever reason I wanted to be a nuclear engineer, so I went to Penn State for nuclear engineering and made a career out of it. Literally worked for Westinghouse for 36 years. I'm not sure those days are bygone. You don't hear that much more anymore where people work for one corporate company for that long a period. So my experience is from that perspective. But went into Westinghouse Nuclear, designed, built, fueled, serviced nuclear power plants around the world. Eventually got into the business side of the house, the strategic planning. So after my nuclear engineering degree at Penn State, I shared with you guys, I went to night school at Pitt, picked up an MBA, and kind of started on that track. And about halfway through my career, switched to the business side of running the business, helping to run the business, instead of being on the technical side. So, and got to retire early, was in a position to be able to make a choice, so I was able to retire early. And then I've been very active since then, as you know, trying to do a lot of volunteer work. I do a lot of strategic planning for nonprofit companies, nonprofit organizations. I love doing that. but also very active every day, as you know. Running, cycling, skiing, anything to be outside and trying to make the best of retirement as long as I can.
So a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
A lot to unpack. And you just say it so nonchalantly. And what you designed when you first and you came out with your degree from Penn State.
Yeah.
You were designing nuclear power plants, basically.
Well, Westinghouse was the original, so we just followed in new designs and went from there. Yeah. So it was. It's not. I don't think very often where people get to say, going into college, this is what I want to be, and then spend 36 years of that doing that as a career. That changes a lot. So I think that was kind of unique to Westinghouse. A lot of unique to a lot of companies.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of old Pittsburgh companies like U.S. Steel and all those kind of things. Yeah.
So in my wildest dreams, I never thought that I would become a nuclear engineer. Right.
Yeah. That was going to be my question. How the heck did you get to decide that you want to be a nuclear engineer?
It's interesting, Colin. When I was in high school, I wanted to be an engineer. But the state of Pennsylvania in 1974 decided to offer nuclear science to high school seniors as a course, because they were starting to build nuclear power plants in Pennsylvania, and they had this vision of rolling them out across. So I took nuclear science courses as a high school and senior and just fell in love with it. Was fascinated with it. So when I went off applying for colleges, it was to be a nuclear engineer. And so that's how I ended up at Penn State, was a nuclear engineering degree.
And talk to us about that a little bit. What was your experience like at Penn State? I mean, was there ever a moment while getting a degree in nuclear science, nuclear engineering couldn't have been easy.
No.
So how were you able to persevere and push through?
It was hard because you're balancing. I mean, I belonged to joined a fraternity as the end of my freshman year. And so I lived in a fraternity house for 3 years on campus. A lot of Penn State athletes, a lot of football players, Colin. So, it was distractions, to put it mildly, but it's just something you wanted to do, so you had to find the time to do it. You had to make time to study. You had to, you had to get it done. It was a very hard program. It's not easy. There's a lot of very hard programs, and so you just kind of get through it as best you can.
So I met you yesterday for the first time. Retired gentleman, and you look like you're preparing for the Tour de France, in shape, in your biking gear, right? So obviously that takes a certain level of discipline, to be as in shape as you are. I see you got your Fitbit on. Yeah. Now that type of discipline, where do you think that came from? Did that come as you were growing up? Was it something your parents did? Did you have it innately? Where did that kind of come from? And is that something you attribute to your success?
I would say that's probably out of the nuclear engineering degree. Part of it is just trying to be disciplined and get things done, manage your time. And you have to do this, and you want to be off socializing with your friends, but you have to be studying. So I actually started running as a stress relief in college. My junior and senior year, taking 4 or 5 engineering courses at a time, we'd go off and just run around Penn State's cross-country course. So I started becoming a runner, and then started cycling, and then started skiing. And it's, it is something that I do every day. To me, I'm waking up in the morning, and the first thing I'm thinking about is, am I skiing today? Am I running, or am I cycling today? And then I go off and do the rest of the day. So it's just something I learned, picked up early on in my career. Even in a career working for Westinghouse, stress relief was running for me. And on the road, at home, every day I tried to find some place to do it. So it became innate in my life. And then when I retired, as you saw yesterday, that's just something I do every day.
I love that. Now, maybe one thing I would like to hear a little bit more about, too, is that stress side of things. Because people who aren't in corporate America, or who haven't risen to the levels that you raised to, don't understand the types of pressure that you deal with on a day-to-day basis and how stressful certain decisions can be made. I would love to hear you touch on that a little bit, the stress of your job and how you dealt with it. I know you just said you ran and found ways to be physically active, but how much did the stress of your job actually weigh on you?
I was able to manage it. I mean, anybody that's gone up through corporate America and gone up the ladder knows about stress. The higher you get in an organization, mostly you're dealing with problems, right?
Yep.
It's problems that can't be solved down in lower organizations. So you're trying to get things done. You're trying to find solutions going forward. And my job is strategy, trying to make sure Westinghouse continued to grow. continue to be competitively positioned, all that kind of stuff. So those are hard decisions, and they're not. Or else they would be done easily, and they'd be down in the bottom of at the working level. So that's part of corporate life, I think. Is am I making the right decision? It just not only affects me. Sometimes it affects your personal career. Sometimes it affects the company. It's long hours. You're traveling a lot. I flew around the world constantly. As anybody in corporate America, a lot of people have done that. So that's you need a way to manage that. And I saw a lot of people that would just work 60, 70 hours a week and paid for it at the end of their life and the end of their careers. So that's kind of the downside. So I think I was always trying to find that balance, trying to get through nuclear engineering, living in a fraternity at Penn State, trying to work at Westinghouse, doing the things I like to do, running and cycling and climbing and hiking, so it's always a balance, I think. So stress management is dealing with that balance in life, I think.
Along the same lines, but sort of on a different tact here, as you were climbing, did you ever hit a point where you hit the ceiling, so to speak? You hit a wall. How did you push through that, and what was the key for you there?
I think everybody in that world hits bumps and bruises. You hit a ceiling, you got to go sideways. You may not, you get pigeonholed for a job, and it may not be the right job for you, and you have to get out and do something else. To me, it was just, I don't know, maybe it was because of my engineering background. It was just the belief that I wanted to do what was right for the company, the greater good of Westinghouse. So I was always looking for facts, always looking for analysis, trying to make sure we were doing the right thing. Very much need to be introspective too, because when you hit those bumps and ceilings, you got to say why. What didn't I do? What did I fail? And everybody does. And so it's in your attitude about how you deal with those going forward. But to me, it was always, innate brain. I loved the company. I loved nuclear engineering. I believed in what I was doing. Right. So it was always just trying to find the right way to make that happen. And it's never a linear straight line. You always got to make turns and shifts and everything else like that.
I love that. And one thing that I really love is you have to be introspective. Right. That's not easy for people.
No. And I'm not real good at it. So, you need to force yourself to do that.
And was there ever a point that you can remember where you were doing that and you realized this is what I need to change, or this is what I should be doing? Do you remember what it was and what you had to change, and how difficult was it?
Yeah. When you get into positions and you find out you're not doing nearly as well as you think you ought to be, and the company is. So you sit back and say, why is that? And is it because I'm not communicating well? I'm not executing? So the perspective for me was, all right, what are we trying to do? And I felt we were doing the right thing. We were still doing the right thing. We were still growing as a company. We just weren't communicating and executing it well. And so you do a plan B, and so I never changed what my belief was and what was the right thing to do. You just had to find a different way to accomplish that, to communicate that in an organization, to get show to the very top senior management that this is still the right thing to do, even though we may not be communicating it right. This is the right thing to do, and that's based on facts and data and analysis, and keeping the greater good of any organization in perspective. That's not because it's a personal thing.
Right. If you don't mind, one, get this follow up, because I know you, and you say, talk about numbers, right? For you, obviously you're an engineer, so, but even, you and I have had conversations about my business,
right?
And we sat down and discussed, and it's numbers. How, tell people, how important to have that backing any decision you're making.
Especially, it started being technical, clearly. As an engineer, you're trained.
Right.
You need data analysis, everything else. But for strategic planning, it turned out to be, you got to avoid personal opinions. You got to avoid that, I think we ought to do this. So it's why. Do you have the data? Do you have analysis? What do your customers want? What do your customers like about, why do they come to Brushes and Beans?
Right.
Why? So you need that analysis, you need that data, and then you need to figure out how do you compete within that little framework, because there's other coffee shops, there's other corporations that buy nuclear power around the world, whatever the right situation is. So understanding numbers, understanding data, understanding analysis, to me is absolutely the key to strategic planning. And all the work I've done for nonprofits have been also in that vein. Same conversations I had with you. It's like, hey, did you go out and talk to the people? Did you get analysis? Did you do a survey? Did you ask what people want? You can't move forward without having data and analysis. and that kind of stuff, in my opinion,
Right.
to be successful in that kind of stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
Yeah, so there's a couple things I'm going to want to circle back on, but I want to kind of pick up on this topic specifically. So then when it's so data driven, how are you competing against other, firms or within the industry, right? Like what separates Westinghouse from whoever your top competitor was? If you all have access to certain data, how do you use that data then to make important decisions to push you forward?
It's just something I picked up from being involved with other strategic planning companies that would come in Westinghouse, and I would learn from that, and I'd learn from that. So it's called strategic differentiation, Colin. So there's only three ways why people buy things from somebody. It's a superior product, a superior service, or it's low cost. It's really pretty much that simple. And so you have to differentiate yourself in what you're going to do. So if you're going to be a superior product provider, you better have the best product out there that a customer is willing to pay a premium for, or else you can't compete that way. Or the greatest service, take whatever it is, whether it's, it's walking into an auto dealership or going to Disney World or whatever else. What makes you feel good as a service? Or else you're going to be forced to compete on cost. And a lot of people do that. Walmart, Costco, they're Amazon. Those are all cost differentiators. But so that's where it's one of the fundamentals of strategic planning. I think is if you can't differentiate yourself in product or service, you're going to compete in cost. So that's where the data comes in. What do the customers expect from you? Are the customers willing to pay more? What is this competition doing? If you want, do they have a better product to you? Do they have a better service for you? You have to understand all that outside-in analysis before you do a respective on yourself that says, okay, how do I compete? And it's less so for nonprofits, but it helps nonprofits figure out what they're doing, how they're doing, and why they're doing. Because, a lot of them just have a vision that says, I want to be able to do this and help this organization, person, whatever. So how? Why? How can you do that? So that's the data analysis, I think.
So I come from a family of engineers. My wife's family comes from, a bunch of engineers. So I'm used to the way that engineers are kind of wired and think and speak. And I think it relates really well to the, being able to be introspective.
Right.
And I feel like that's generally hard for engineers, not to generalize, but for the most part, because you're so data driven, you're like, I know this is right. I know this is right. So when it came to working your way up the corporate ladder, I know that there were times where you got stuck. Was that your differentiation factor, that you were able to be introspective as a engineer, or what do you think was your differentiation factor as you rose?
I think it's a combination, but I still think it was a strategic planning.
Okay.
I mean, I was able to convince our execs, and we continue to grow in our owners that, we can buy this company, or we can compete in this market, or we can develop this product, but it had to be strategic. Community. Why can we be successful like that? It's just not that we want to do this, but why and how. So I think it was a combination, Colin. It was, I was introspective, sure, because engineers aren't the greatest sensitive people in terms of their impressions on other people and their communication skills.
You're right.
But we're, we're fact oriented. So when you're telling somebody that we ought to be doing this instead of that, you do need to be cognizant of how you're coming across and doing that. But it's still, in a very technical company, it's the combination. But that's that's very unique to a very technical company as opposed to a commercial service company or something else.
Along those same lines, what's very important, I witnessed this in my time at PNC. When you reach those levels, you're also a very strong leader. You're not going to get to the top of a huge company like a Westinghouse, whatever, without having strong leadership skills. And I witness it when you come with your boys every week. There's no question you're the leader of that group. Yeah. And I just see how you set a tone, you set an example. Can you reflect back on your career for us, Rick, and just talk about your leadership style? Did it evolve over your time at Westinghouse? Was there something you fell back on in terms of leadership?
You learn through experience. You learn through education. But I think it's all about leading by example. I mean, you can say we're going to do this, but you got to communicate why we need to do that. And then everybody watches you and how you behave and the decisions you make. So if it's not in line with that direction or goal, Everyone else is smart. They see it in a second. They'll know when you're blowing smoke. So to me, it was always by example. We're going to do this, so let's get in and do it. And you lead from out front. You're out working outages in nuclear power plants. You're out walking the fuel fabrication floor. You're out talking with customers. You're not sitting back in an office.
Right.
It's those kind of things. And the same with the nonprofits. You got to get in there and show that you care about it, and it's something you want to do. It's not something you have to do. It's something you want to do, and you lead by example. That's, to me, is the biggest thing by far and away.
Okay. Yep, I like it.
So ironically enough, I'm actually writing a piece. That's part of what I do. I love to write. So I'm actually writing a piece on leadership. So I'm really excited and curious to kind of hear your answer there. But one thing I always say is when you're a leader, like you just said, you lead by example. You aren't afforded the same mistakes that other people get to make.
Yeah.
The limelight is always on you. You are held to a higher standard, and frequently you set that standard. And I think that can be really hard for people who get into leadership positions. They've had great success, but once they're there and the limelight is on them, whether it's an athlete or a performer or an executive like yourself, did you ever feel that pressure, or is it something that you just kind of ignored and just really just fell in love with the process of what you did?
I mean, sure. You think about it all the time when you're leading an organization, or whether directly or indirectly, like a strategic planning function. Yeah, there's a lot of weight there, and you're asking your owners for a lot of money to do stuff, to make an acquisition, develop a new product and stuff. But it still comes back to having trust in the process, having the trust in collecting the right data and having the right analytical mindset. And again, something I skipped over lightly, but saying we're going to do this, but explaining why we're going to do this. We need to do this because this will help our company do this, or it will help our customers, or whatever. That's really the important part, is communicating why to an organization and doing it. And then, yeah, sure, you feel the pressure. I mean, if it doesn't work, and no one's perfect, no one's ever going to bat 1,000, in any venue, like you just said. So it's, again, how do you react at that? Are you introspective? Do you learn? Do you have people are human. We have a big thing in the industry. It's called human performance. People make mistakes all the time, every day. Yep. Some are just more impactful than others. So why do people make mistakes? You learn, you help them, try to put them in positions where they can be more successful and eliminate some of those things. So human performance and mistakes. Yeah, it's there all the time. It's there every day, and even in the things I'm doing now, whether it's ski patrol or up at Hidden Valley, you're making decisions all the time that, and people make mistakes. So it's how do you handle them? How do you adapt to them?
I'm always fascinated because we do all make mistakes, right?
Everybody.
And we deal with those mistakes differently.
Right.
Some people were able to learn from it and move on. Do you ever remember a time, Rick, at Westinghouse where something didn't go your way?
Yeah.
How did you deal with it? How did you move on?
Yeah, even at the top level, when some things don't work and it's your fault, and it's hard pill to swallow. But, and I guess this is where things are different now. As I said before, worked for 36 years for Westinghouse. People don't seem to do that anymore now. People move a lot, right?
Yeah.
They move companies and move companies and move companies. To me, it was like I never even considered leaving or moving.
Right.
I was going to stay in Westinghouse. And so I had to figure out why we weren't successful, what needed to change. And again, was it what we were doing, or was it how we were doing, or it was why we weren't communicating what we were doing well enough? And to me, it's those latter things most of the time tend to be the differentiators. You have a good plan, you just don't have a good implementation plan. And not to say we didn't, but yeah. So to me, I wasn't going to leave Westinghouse. I was just going to figure out, all right, what do I got to do for the rest of my career in Westinghouse? And how do I best perform? So put your head down, work hard, trust in the data, trust in the process, and keep going.
I love that.
I love that.
Yeah, go ahead.
We're all three sports fans here, right?
Oh, yeah.
Huge. So something you said there just resonated with me, where you were going to stick with Westinghouse no matter what. Nowadays, we see athletes all the time where if it doesn't go their way at Pitt, they're going to transfer somewhere else. Or it doesn't go their way, Penn State,
Right.
They're going to leave, they're going somewhere else instead of having to deal and push through.
Right.
Talk about that. And, I think it's awful because these kids aren't learning that lesson. But what do you? I mean, what are your
I do
thoughts
too,
there?
but the world's changed. It's a two-way street.
Right.
It's corporate no longer expects somebody to work for them for 30 years or for a career, and employees don't. People work for 2 or 3 years and they're looking for the next job already. Right? What's their next opportunity to grow?
Yeah, the loyalty's gone. Both sides.
It's changed.
Yeah.
I think it's awful too. As we talked about sports. One of the examples was like 3 or 4 years ago. Penn State had one of the best backfield rooms in the state. Not one of those kids stayed through the whole program. They were all gone with new recruits coming in, so they weren't going to play. They move on. I mean, that's just one example. It's just it's the Pirates drive me crazy that way. It's like they can't keep. They don't keep their young stars long term.
Right.
But I think that's again being introspective to say it's not the same. The world has changed. It is changing. It's going to keep changing. So if you don't adapt with that, then you're going to be left behind, like anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really hard, and the world has changed so much. Even in, the 10, 15 years, I've been in high school, college, in the professional world, everything's changing, like you said. And I think what I like to do is find traits, right, that allow people to rise in any type of environment, any time period in history. And one thing I keep hearing from you is, trust the process. You loved the numbers. You loved, nuclear engineering.
Yeah.
I think that that's something that can be applied anywhere, right? So even if you're an athlete who transfers from one school to another, or if you're someone in corporate America, going from company to company, it's finding something that you are actually passionate about.
Right.
And I saw something on Twitter that I loved. And someone was saying, well, how do I know what I want to do with my life or what business I want to start? And they said, imagine you are thrown into an audience and you have to give a 20-minute presentation, no time to prepare. Whatever it is you can do without thinking, present 20 minutes, you're probably supposed to be in that industry, right? And I feel like if I did that for you, you, boom, within a snap of a finger, would put a presentation together and just talk about everything. Yeah. Am I off base there? Do you feel that that's accurate?
No, I like it. And it's even more so in retirement because, I mentioned I do strategic planning for nonprofits. We do strategic planning for our homeowners association up at Hidden Valley. I mean, it's 1,100 homes. There's 9 full employees, a big budget. But we use the same strategic planning process and data analysis that I used in corporate. I've done it with Westinghouse retiree organization. So you find things that work for you in life, and then you apply them for different things. And the big difference now, with the excitement calling in retirement, is I get to choose what I want to do, not things you have to do. Yep. And you come through as an athlete or through corporate America. There's a lot of stuff you have to do to be successful that are not fun. You really don't want to do them, but you have to do them. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm at a point in life where I can pick and choose the things I want to do, but it's still doing that same. I think to me, things I fell back on made me successful or helped me be successful earlier. You apply those same process, same thinking, and do whatever you're doing going forward, and hopefully for a long time in retirement.
Thank you so far, Rick. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back. You'll hear more from Rick Etling. There's a lot been shared thus far that we'll unpack here during the break, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned, everybody. Beyond the Norm is brought to you by Brushes and Beans Cafe in Murraysville, PA. I know a lot of people, you hear Murraysville, and it's like, oh, man, that's out in the boom. No, very conveniently located right off of Route 22. Wherever you're going, there it is. And at Brushes and Beans, we are your home to the area's best coffee. And so when you come in and grab a coffee, you can also sit down and paint your own pottery. So when you're talking about relaxation, which is part of mental fortitude and being able to just clear your mind, great way to do it. Come in, sit down, grab, like I said, your favorite coffee drink. Colin has his. He loves cold brew. Come in, grab a drink, sit down, relax, pick a piece. It's a great gift idea. Great custom gift idea that you can make for the holidays, birthdays, whatever it may be. And also we have a private party room which you can use, bachelorette parties, corporate outings. It's a great team building opportunity for those of you that look for that. And we want it to be a place where you can come, relax, be comfortable environment, clean, neat. And if we think we get you there, you'll really enjoy it. So once again, brought to you by Brushes and Beans Cafe and by Athletic Fortitude. Colin, take it away.
Yeah, so Athletic Fortitude, what we do, we work with professional and Olympic athletes. We created a private community in particular where we work with athletes on everything from mental health to performance psychology, right? We work in group settings, and we're really there to build, one another up. The idea is to get elite minds around other elite minds who are experiencing similar things and who want to elevate each other to ultimate levels. Also included, send out a weekly newsletter called the Fortitude Chronicle. Where I write.
I get it. It's excellent.
I appreciate that. I write about, just different things that are inspirational, motivational, and help create disciplinary habits, right? And then I include, different stories throughout the world that are going on to, give people a taste of what's really going on in the mental side of the world and to use those tips and actions to help elevate them to another level as well. Those are the big things involved with Athletic Fortitude, and we're taking it to the next level, and I'm excited to continue to work with people and help them out.
And now here's more Beyond the Norm.
It's funny. It's as if you looked at my Twitter this morning when you spoke and said, you have to do what you have to do until you get to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
So I listened to a clip of Jay Bilas, the basketball analyst, talking about that exact quote, right? And he talked about young athletes, young professionals. They need to get used to doing things they have to do until they can start doing what they want to do, right? And my definition, I'm very philosophical, is I talk about like retirement, right? The day I retire is the day I stop sacrificing today for a better tomorrow. Right. So I may still work till the day I die, and I anticipate that. But it's going to be work that I want to do. So I need to start building leverage in different areas of my life so I truly get to choose what I want to do. So when you say something like that, it pops out to me because I believe, again, there's common themes amongst everybody who achieve great things and do things that they love and accomplish whatever they set out to accomplish. So I'd kind of like to hear you maybe touch on that a little bit more in depth, because it sounds like you still do a lot in retirement, but it sounds like you love it. You're working, but to you it probably doesn't feel like too much work. No. And I'd like to hear you touch on that.
There's you've probably seen this. There's a premise about how to be healthy and active in a long retirement. There's actually a book out there called Younger Next Year that talks about three things: about being physically active to stem off disease. Mm-hmm. So as soon as you start sitting, things happen. Staying socially connected with friends, family, cohorts, whatever you want to do. But the third part is mentally engaged. And that's where I think people probably don't take as much advantage of retirement as they can. And for me, that's the strategic planning for nonprofits, whether it's Ski Patrol or the Woodland Hills Foundation, helping those guys. It's staying connected, staying sharp, looking forward to doing things, but all in the context of this is stuff I choose to do, I want to do, I feel passionate about. I don't have to do any of this,
right?
So that's the difference, I think, is you get into retirement. So this whole attitude about being physically connected, physically active, socially connected, mentally engaged is a process, and it's a thing you need to do consciously. Hopefully I'll do it for the next 25 years or as long as I'm around retirement. So the way I look at it is, all right, I managed my first 36 years with Westinghouse. Now I got to manage hopefully my next 30 years of retirement, and how to make that as rewarding as possible, for me and for my wife and my family and everybody else too. So, yeah.
So what you're touching on there is goal setting, right? And the importance, you've obviously set goals for yourself along the way. Talk to us about the importance of this, both short-term. You and I have had this discussion one-off in the shop. It's how important is it to set those short-term goals? And you just mentioned long-term goals. Like you want to have a healthy and productive retirement, right? That's the overall.
I think everybody does. I mean,
right, yeah.
So the question is how do you manage that? How do you manage that?
And how do you attain it, right? Yeah. You've been very successful with that. You hit the dream that we all talk about, right? You were able to retire young, and it took a hell of a lot to get to that point, and now you get to enjoy it.
Right.
That doesn't happen without you setting these goals and achieving them.
Right. Yes, you need to. So I was able to retire young. The real decision was to be in a position at a certain age to make a decision. Do you want to retire or not at that point? Depending on how things are going in your life. So that's really the goal: is what do you want to accomplish? What do you want to achieve? And I don't that's nothing special to me. That's just innate. If you're going to run, if you're going to compete, do I want to run a 18-minute 5K?
Right.
Do I want to do a metric in a bicycle race? Do I want to climb this mountain? Those are just things you decide. Once you decide you want to do that, then yeah, you got to go work at it. It's not going to come easy. It's not going to come to you. You got to, just like your career, you got to go work and do that kind of stuff. But to me, it's, I don't know. It's just, again, what do you want to do? So this is my favorite question for people. I was able to retire early, and other people says, "Well, Rick, I want to think about retiring early." I said, "Well, what are you going to do when you retire?" And if you get a deer in the headlight look, then they are not ready to retire. So it's, what are you going to do? How are you going to fill your day? How are you going to give back to whatever you want to give back to, whatever organization or society or your family or whatever you want to do? I think those are things you need to ask yourself. Then everything else falls in place, to me. So I don't know. I don't know how to answer about goal setting. It's just,
it's innate in you.
It's
That's
innate.
What it sounds like. Yeah. You've
It's
always had it.
Yeah, but I think anybody successful does.
Yeah.
Whether you're an athlete or whether you're a businessman, politician, whatever. I mean, you just know you want to do that.
Right.
I think to pick up off of that, it's saying what you want to do and then determining if you're willing to pay the price to get what you want. Right. I think you articulated that really well. I think that is different, maybe innately to you, that other people don't get, right? Because everybody wants everything.
Right.
It's just very few people are actually willing to pay that price, and it sounds like you are willing to pay that price. So I think that is something unique. I don't know if that's something, like you said, that's innate, or if it's something that you've developed, or if it's something that was taught to you. Maybe you could touch on where that actually came from, being willing to pay that price tag.
To me, I think it was always being around successful people and leaders. Being brought into those groups, and you see what it takes for them to be successful. We talked about our Penn State experience, about corporate experience. When I started skiing, decided I wanted to be a ski patroller. Man, there are some good skiers out there that make me look like a piker, and I just chase them all day long. So you're just trying to learn. One of my best friends is 77 years old. He's probably the best skier on that mountain, or one of the best skiers on that mountain. It's just incredible. So it's being around other people that like similar. You immerse yourself in that. I think that's also an innate trait. You tend to associate with people that you want to associate with and be like.
Right.
So, I want to be hanging around skiers in the winter, and I want to be hanging around cyclists and runners in the summertime, or golfers, or whatever it is. I think you look for like-minded people all the time, and that's especially been the case in retirement. Is you just gravitate naturally towards. There's so many people. There's so many options. You see so many people touring the day, and you just say, I kind of want to hang out with those guys. They're pretty cool. So I don't know if that's it, Colin.
This real quick. No, that actually. So Clint Hurdle, as most of us Pittsburghers here know, he said one of the most powerful things ever at a conference I attended that he was speaking at, and it's very similar to what you're saying. Always be the dumbest person in the room, because that's how you learn.
Right.
That's how you grow. Right. So whether it's being the worst skier in a group or whatever, you put yourself there so you can learn and grow. And he always says, once you're the smartest person in the room, go find a new room to be in.
Yeah, that's probably true.
And I just think that, again, something that he spoke about that I try and live every day, you just articulated in your own sphere, and even in retirement, just different things that you want to be in. So I do like making connections and parallels to different sayings that people may hear in life. I think that was really cool.
Yeah, good.
Is there anything you wish you would have done differently? We talked about all the, great, but is there anything you reflect back on, Rick, and said?
Sometimes you make mistakes. Sometimes you hurt people when you make mistakes. Those are the things I think you look back and say, that was dumb. Right. There was no gain to do that. There was no reason to do that. Just you try to in hindsight, you just try to be open and transparent as you can with people. They're not always going to like to hear the message. You're not always going to like to hear a message that, you're not doing well with something, right? That's humbling. That's hard to hear. But just treat people with respect and be transparent. And those are, I think, the life lessons, whether it's family members, corporate members, friends, Those are the things I think if you really look back that haunt you.
Yeah.
I think so. Corporate decisions,
Yeah.
You do the best you can.
Mm-hmm.
Did I run my best 5K today? Who cares? It doesn't matter.
It
It matter. It doesn't. Right.
People.
I think it's how you treat people.
Mm-hmm.
Have you helped them? Have you encouraged them? Especially when you hurt people in retrospect. Most people don't want to do that. Some people do, but most people, they don't. It's
Right.
Yeah.
You got a last question for Rick?
No, I've really just appreciate you coming on. I think as all guests, I like to ask if there was any just one tidbit of advice that you would like to give to our listeners, boy, girl, athlete, corporate, what would you like to say to them?
I'd say if you're going to do something, be passionate about it. Be all in. If it's not, why doing it then? You don't want to do anything that you don't feel passionate about. You're not going to commit yourself to. Just once you make a decision, be passionate about it and be all in. Go for it. If you succeed, that's great. If you don't, you've given it your best, right? That's all you can do.
Fantastic. Wow.
Awesome.
I thought we were going to have trouble matching Fort last week.
Yeah,
we got a lot of great new information.
Everybody's unique, and
absolutely.
Love to
brings
hear
a different perspective.
Yeah, different
Absolutely.
perspective.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
And I'll see you at the shop.
Yep. Every day's a Tuesday at Mark's shop.
That's right. So that story, I'm glad you mentioned it. So as you heard, Rick's in retirement. So every day he comes in, whether it's a Wednesday, Sunday, Saturday, and he walks in and typical Rick fashion, happy Tuesday, everybody. So that's our joke with Rick is
and
anytime
all
he
Mark
comes
employees,
in, happy
when
Tuesday.
I walk in, all the Mark employees go, happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. That's awesome.
Yeah. So thank you again. Really appreciate it. And we'll be right back to wrap up this week's episode right after this. As we told you earlier, so we don't have to go on all the details again, Beyond the Norm is brought to you by Brushes and Beans Cafe in Murraysville and by Athletic Fortitude. And now, more Beyond the Norm. So I would say for Beyond the Norm, our podcast, what a great start. We're 2 for 2.
Agreed. 2
right?
for 2.
Great start. Sort of like Key Brian Hayes, right? I mean, he scored. I think we're getting there, right?
We're getting there, absolutely.
A lot of great information from Rick that hopefully everybody out there took to heart and can apply in their daily lives.
Agreed. Everyone that we have on, we hope is able to, articulate some type of thing that we can take away. I think we're 2 for 2, like you said. Phenomenal messages from both of our interviewees and different personalities. As you can see, Rick very stoic, but nonetheless, when you listen for the message, it's phenomenal, and it's really something you can take away.
You're right. And one thing I love, and you always say this, and I'm stealing it from you because I love it, and each in their own unique way.
Right.
Right? 2 very different guests, as you mentioned.
Right.
And a lot of similar themes,
Right.
but very unique.
Absolutely. And that's what I said at the beginning of the show. I'll say probably every show is greatness has commonalities, but each individual has their own unique perspective on how they were able to reach it. And so that's why I love being able to get different people in here. We've only had 2. Can't wait to see who's in the future. We're going to get some pretty special guests on, but being able to articulate both of those avenues is why I love doing this.
Before we wrap up for this week, we always like to close with a segment we call Not the Norm. And this week, I'm going to turn it over to Colin. He came across a tweet from Tyrann Mathieu, a professional football player, safety, one of the best in the game. And Colin showed it to me earlier, and it's fascinating. So, Colin, all yours.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was something I featured in my newsletter, and I became obsessed with it super quickly. Back in 1957, a study at Harvard, researchers wanted to test to see how long rats, of all animals, could tread water. So they put these animals, or these rats, in water and say, well, I don't tell because I don't know if rats actually understand, but just see, fight or flight, how long can they last? Mm-hmm. First time, right before exhaustion, right before they're about to drop under, was 15 minutes. So they give the rats time to recover, whatever. So they throw them back in there a second time to see, okay, second time, how much longer will they be able to tread water?
This is fascinating.
And in the tweet, it says, how long do you think? 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes? It ends up being 60 hours.
It's amazing.
So the belief that these rats had, believing that something or someone was going to save them, propelled them from going from 15 minutes to 60 hours because they held on to that belief, knowing that they were rescued the first time. So the premise of it is, what in your life do you have such a deep belief in yourself that can propel you to such great stakes? Right? I think we all have something that's holding us back. If we can find that self-belief that's going to propel us from 15 minutes to 60 hours, whatever the equivalent is in your life, find it, find what you love, like Rick said, find what you're passionate about, and hold such a deep belief in yourself and in the preparation and in the actions that you've taken, and go out and do it and achieve great things. If a rat can go drastically change from 15 minutes to 60 hours in treading water based off of a singular belief, why can't we as humans who have cognitive thought, and in my opinion, I don't know if I'm right, have stronger brain power than mice and rats?
Yes.
Why can't we do the same thing? So whatever your self-limiting beliefs are, get rid of them, right? And truly believe that you can be the best in the world, be the Elon Musks of the world at whatever it is that you do, because I do believe that we all have something innate to us that we can achieve those great lengths. It's just we have to have that belief and be willing to put in the work.
Put in the work and find what it is.
Right.
That's not always easy.
Right. No, you're right.
Right. And that's one of the things, you're always trying to get better in whatever it may be. And so you read and you explore and you research. It's not always easy to find that thing that you love.
Right.
And that you're passionate about.
No, it's hard. And the thing to realize, I think, as well, is that might change down the line. But being able to pursue your passions in general is a superpower. Because like you said, if you can't always find it, it's not easy. But when you do, latch onto it and go for it and give it everything you have.
Right. Some great messages for you there as we close out episode 2 of Beyond the Norm. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Please, give us a like, a follow, whatever it may be on the respective platform. You can find us on Twitter, X, YouTube, Spotify. Give us a shout, share, do whatever you need to do. We want to keep doing this and providing this information for you, bringing these great guests onto the show that really enlighten you. I mean, like we said, we're 2 for 2. I've learned a hell of a lot over the past 2 weeks.
Absolutely. And, we appreciate you tuning in, and make sure to leave us a review or reach out to us if you want to hear something, or if you want us to explore a certain topic, or even have a guest on. We love doing this and can't appreciate you guys enough for tuning in.
Perfectly stated, and a great way to end the show. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.